On a sunny California morning, I began my journey working at a small cafe nestled in a quiet neighborhood near the beach. The cafe was a warm and cozy place, filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods. It had a family-friendly atmosphere, which made it a favorite spot for many customers. I decided to work here during my summer holidays to earn some extra money. In the first few days, everything went smoothly. I enjoyed interacting with the customers and serving them coffee and pastries. But after a week, I started noticing some unusual things. One day, I was working in the kitchen, preparing coffee and rinsing some cups. Suddenly, I heard a strange whispering sound coming from one of the back corners of the kitchen. I paused for a moment and listened closely. There was no one else in the kitchen, and the other sounds from the cafe were muffled behind the kitchen walls. I tried to ignore the sound and continue working, but the whispering persisted, and sometimes I heard faint footsteps. At first, I thought I was just tired or that my mind was playing tricks on me, but things didn't stop there. When I would return to the kitchen after closing the cafe, I began noticing strange things. Items that had been neatly placed on the shelves were sometimes moved or scattered. Once, when I was alone, the lights suddenly started flickering intermittently before going out, as if responding to something unseen. I felt a sense of unease, but I didn't tell anyone about what I was experiencing, fearing I might come across as exaggerating. As time passed, these strange occurrences became more frequent, making me feel increasingly uncomfortable in the cafe I once considered a safe and cozy place. Over time, the strange occurrences weren't limited to the kitchen, they began to spread to other areas of the cafe. While working the evening shift, I noticed the lights in the far corner of the lounge flickering irregularly. I started hearing faint sounds resembling whispers coming from different corners, like conversations that couldn't be understood. One night, while I was cleaning the tables, I noticed unclear shadows swiftly passing by the windows. The shadows moved in unnatural ways, making me feel like I was being watched by something unseen. I decided to ignore it, but the feeling of unease never left me. I told one of my coworkers, Mark, about my experiences, but instead of reassuring me, he said in a calm voice, "I've heard stories about this place. They say it was an old cafe before it became what it is now. Some people believe the place isn't entirely empty." Mark's words weren't comforting. Instead of easing my anxiety, they only heightened my tension. Doubt began to creep into my mind. I would hear faint screams during the night, and sometimes I'd find doors not fully closed even though I was sure I had shut them. When I'd pick up the trash, I'd feel something breathing behind me, and when I turned around, I'd find nothing but darkness. One evening, while working alone in the kitchen after the cafe had closed, I heard it, the sound that always came as a faint whisper, now clear, as if someone was calling my name in a low voice. I quickly turned around, but no one was there, yet the feeling of intense cold surrounded me, as if something unseen was watching me. I started to get more and more anxious, and these phenomena made working at the cafe a terrifying experience. I had to decide how to deal with these frightening encounters that had become a part of my daily routine. The anxiety and tension were building up every day, affecting my ability to concentrate at work. One late night, after I had closed the cafe and started cleaning the kitchen, the sounds began to intensify, mysterious whispers, invisible footsteps, and a strange warmth in the cold corners. All of this made me decide to search for an explanation. I gathered my courage and began investigating the history of the cafe. I searched online and asked some of the old customers. I discovered that the cafe used to be an old house before it was converted into a cafe, and it had a long history spanning decades. Over the years, this place had witnessed many unfortunate events and untold secrets. Then one day, while I was working a night shift at the cafe, I decided to conduct an experiment. I set up some cameras around the kitchen and the main room to monitor any unusual activity. That night, everything seemed quiet, but after reviewing the recordings in the morning, I was shocked by what I saw. Objects were moving on their own, lights were flickering for no reason, and sometimes there was a mysterious figure passing through the corners. I decided to talk to the cafe management about my feelings and experiences. The management was aware of what was happening and said they had received similar complaints from previous employees. In that moment, I felt I wasn't alone, but that wasn't enough to calm me down. In the end, I made my decision. It was clear that this place wasn't right for me, and the experiences I had were more than just fleeting anxiety. I knew that the cafe was a place facing challenges beyond logical explanation. I announced my resignation and left the cafe, feeling relieved by my decision. The ending was bittersweet, but I felt liberated from the burden of this place that had no place in my life. As I walked away, I looked back at the cafe one last time, hoping it would find the peace it seemed to have been missing for so long. Before we continue, if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and share the video so we can continue creating more stories. I was a student at a high school in a quiet Canadian town, where life moved along routinely and smoothly. The school was situated in a modern architectural area, yet there was an old classroom located in the east wing of the building. This classroom was rarely used, but it was always surrounded by a mysterious atmosphere. At the beginning of my school term, I heard some of the older students sharing strange stories about this classroom. They said that things happened in that room that couldn't be explained, but I thought these stories were nothing more than tales to add excitement. I didn't believe anything supernatural was happening, but curiosity led me to wonder. One day, we had morning classes, and one of the teachers announced a change in the schedule, so we decided to have a lesson in this eerie classroom. As we entered the room, it was unusually cold, even though the heating was working fine. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and the windows were dusty, as if the room hadn't been used in years. During the first lesson, nothing strange happened, but after a while, I began to notice unusual things. There were faint whispers coming from the corners, and sometimes I could hear soft footsteps on the floor, even though we were all seated in our places. When I asked my classmates if they heard the same sounds, they said they had noticed them too, but avoided talking about it, fearing they might seem like they were exaggerating. The next day, I was in the same classroom, sitting by the window. Suddenly, strange shadows appeared across the glass, their shapes unclear but shifting in unnatural ways. When I looked closer, the shadows vanished as if they were just a figment of my imagination. I felt something unsettling stay with me throughout the day, and the whispers started getting louder and clearer, as if trying to say something. The students in the classroom began to feel anxious, especially when we started finding unexplained things happening in the room, books moving from their places, papers suddenly scattering, and mysterious threats appearing on the chalkboard for no reason. These events began happening more frequently, putting everyone in a state of tension and fear. By then, it became clear that something unusual was happening in that classroom, and we started to realize that there was something beyond rational explanation. As the days passed, the eerie classroom became increasingly unsettling. It was no longer just about faint whispers or strange noises. The phenomena began to escalate noticeably, and the students felt genuine fear every time they entered that classroom. One day, while we were in class, I sensed something unusual in the air. The lights flickered in an unnatural way, and when we looked up at the ceiling, we saw the paint peeling off in an odd manner, as if something invisible was trying to break through. The windows suddenly started shaking, even though the weather outside was perfectly calm. The events began to accelerate in a terrifying manner. During one class, I noticed that one of the textbooks on the table next to me started opening and closing repeatedly, as if an unseen hand was playing with it. I tried to tell the teacher what was happening, but he dismissed it as an exaggeration. But when other students started noticing the same thing, it became harder to explain away. One night, the school was hosting a sports event, so there were only a few staff members in the building. I decided to take the opportunity and go to the eerie classroom alone to explore what might be behind these phenomena. I entered the classroom, and darkness filled the space. I used my flashlight and slowly scanned the room. Suddenly, I froze in place when I saw a mysterious shadow moving across the wall. There was no logical explanation for this shadow, and it became clear that it was something beyond reality. The next day, things became more complicated. Books and papers started scattering randomly around the classroom, and students couldn't sit in their seats without feeling like something invisible was watching them. The situation reached its peak when one student woke up in the middle of the night to find all the school equipment arranged in a strange way, as if it was mimicking a mysterious scene. The school began receiving more complaints from students and parents, and the issue became the talk of the town. The administration initially tried to ignore the problem, but they knew the situation was spiraling out of control. There was no scientific or logical explanation for what was happening, but everyone started feeling a deep sense of unease, and both students and parents felt like they were facing something that couldn't be ignored. The problem began to turn into a crisis, and it was clear that something unnatural was happening in that classroom. The administration started seriously considering how to deal with these phenomena, but the solution was still unclear. With the growing tension and fear among students and faculty members, the administration was forced to make a decisive decision. Emergency meetings with experts in paranormal phenomena began to take place, and the matter became the talk of the town. The students were in a state of constant anxiety, which affected their academic performance and mental well-being. In one of the emergency meetings, the administration decided to conduct a thorough inspection of the classroom. They brought in a team of paranormal experts to examine the place, equipped with the latest technology. They came with energy measurement devices and cameras to detect any unusual activity. I was one of the lucky students allowed to observe the inspection process. The team started their work in the old classroom, and the cameras began recording activities. During the session, clear paranormal activity was detected on the devices, with sudden spikes in energy readings and blurred images appearing on the cameras. The team did not make any clear comments on what was happening, but they collected all their data and later discussed it with the administration. The next day, a meeting was held with all students and faculty members to inform them of the results. The experts stated that the data showed evidence of unusual activity, but they could not precisely identify the source. Nevertheless, they strongly recommended that the classroom be closed and secured to ensure everyone's safety. The administration acted quickly, and the necessary steps were taken. The classroom was immediately closed, and clear warnings were posted at the entrance to the east wing of the building, indicating that entry into this section was prohibited without special permission. Signs were also put up warning of paranormal activity in the hallway, ensuring that no students or unauthorized persons would enter. The final step for the administration was to conduct a comprehensive inspection of the rest of the building to ensure that there were no other similar issues. All necessary security measures were implemented to maintain everyone's safety. As the students adapted to the new situation, there was a sense of relief among everyone. The suspicious classroom became a part of history, and students would pass by it, feeling reassured that it was no longer a place of concern. However, the stories about those phenomena remained a part of the town's folklore, reminding us all that sometimes there are things that go beyond logic and science.